Hi, my name's Dean. I'm an alcoholic returning to World of Warcraft. And it has been 94 days since I last logged in. I play all of the healers in World of Warcraft, mostly in Mythic Plus, and I'm about to log into the Midnight Beta and pug some keys to see how my expectations of the state of the game and healing differ from my opinions after playing. You might be wondering what my expectations are to start with. Well, they are expectations that have been built up over the last couple of days of consuming all of the tier lists, Reddit discussions, Discord posts, and forum rage baiting that I could get my hands on. I haven't read all of the midnight patch notes or kept up to date with the changes that are going on for about 3 months. So I'm going in quite blind. So my expectations are mostly relying on the highlights or the main takeaways of other content creators. And now that the intro's done, let's get straight to the expectations. My expectations for overall healing, I think it's heading in the right direction. I have no idea if that's accurate or if that's how it's actually panned out. But the idea that Blizzard had from their first blue posts when the beta first launched, or maybe even the alpha was first released, where they were talking about how they wanted health bars to not yo-yo as much, and for defensive buttons and cooldowns to not be the kind of be-all and end-all of surviving certain mechanics. If that ends up happening, then healing will take a giant leap in the right direction. I'm expecting a lot more triage healing, hopefully some more decision making, especially rotational sort of gameplay, global to global. Anything that moves healing away from just pressing a cooldown and instantly topping health bars will be a fantastic step. And I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping there's more multi-step healing. Like maybe there are buttons we're pressing to stabilize health bars and then heal everyone back up over multiple seconds rather than instantly topping health bars for them to drop again and then top them again. I'm expecting less emphasis on buff management and setup or like micromanagement of healing, pressing this button always before that button to lead into this button. If that goes away as well for healers, especially if those are buttons where all we're really doing is setting up the final button, then again, moving away from that would be great. As for the bad, or let's say what I'm concerned about for the overall healing, it's that the pruning on a lot of classes or specs maybe has oversimplified some of the rotational throughput or the cooldowns, like a lot of specs going from 2 or 3 cooldowns to 1 might have made healing feel a bit boring or a bit slow. I am worried about raid frames and losing add-ons that help a lot with healing, or at least like getting the information necessary to make the decisions to heal well. I have heard some mixed opinions on how the state of this, how it is in beta, if you can see people's defensive cooldowns or not, if you can see the defensive buffs on their frames or not. But this is the sort of thing that would only have me worried if it sounded like the healing meta or like the amount of incoming damage hadn't changed very much. If we were still playing with, like, let's say the war within health bars with no defensive, that sounds terrible. But if there's less emphasis on pressing defensives to survive through mechanics, and health bars are much less spiky, and let's say X debuff or something doesn't baseline do 200% of someone's health bar in a couple of seconds or whatever, if we're moved away from that, then I think having less information on health bars and raid frames and stuff, I think that's fine. I would even say, if it does work out this way, I would even say that if the main deciding factor to whether or not someone lives or dies in the next few seconds is the actual amount of health they have, then healing is going to feel great. For the last couple of expansions, healing, like how much health someone has probably been the least important factor to know whether or not they're going to survive. And that's been, I think, a pretty awful way to play the game. And if I can quickly glance at party frames and I instantly know that the guy on 20% health is more likely to die than the guy on 50% health or 80% health, then I would say my main hope of all of these changes for Midnight, if that is successful, if that happens, then I'll be very happy overall with how healing is, regardless of the kind of details or the minutia. The one last concern that I'll mention, even though I don't personally have it, is all of the healing specs except Resto Shaman losing kick. Without getting too far into the weeds, the short answer is that I've mained a priest healer for most of the past decade, so I never had a kick anyway. And now if everybody else is in the same boat, except for Resto Shaman, I think that's fine. The only time I would say healers losing kick is bad is if there were still a lot of kicks in dungeons, and it seems like it's nowhere near as bad as it has been. So the short answer for this is I think it's fine. With everything else being equal, I would take the version of World of Warcraft that has less kicks and healers don't have kicks than the version where all healers have kicks and there's more things to kick. All right, starting off with each individual spec. Resto Shaman. I have a table I've filled out for like the gist of all the different highlights and takeaways I found leading up to this video to try and set my expectations. And I didn't see anything good mentioned about Resto Shaman at all. So that's a little bit concerning. Resto Shaman hasn't been like one of my favorite healers ever. So I'm not that worried about it. I'm kind of just assuming Resto Shaman will be pretty similar to Resto Shaman now. Maybe they'll be missing a few buttons, but no major changes. They drop totems, they press Riptide, and then they fill it with whatever else. Their cooldowns I'm expecting to still be quite underwhelming, which is pretty par for the course. We're going to have to see how it plays out. If that is the case, if Resto Shaman cooldowns are somewhat lacking, I'm sorry, I was talking about the positives of Resto Shaman. I didn't have any, so I transitioned straight into the negatives. And the main negative for Resto Shaman that I have seen so far is that their cooldowns kind of suck, which again is exactly what I expect from Resto Shaman, especially in Mythic Plus. Outside of a couple of seasons here and there, Resto Shaman cooldowns have always been awful. I guess we'll have to see how important that becomes in like how they feel to play or balancing them when we've got a Resto Shaman that has no external cooldown defensive for the tank and also terrible cooldowns like party cooldowns. We'll see. I have seen a lot of talk about Resto Shaman getting absolute like the raw end of the stick, especially in early beta. Apparently it's not so bad now, but this is mostly down to the mega pruning that they got. It kind of seems like half the Resto Shaman spells just got removed and the other half may be lacking in certain areas or they're just not that good. Like Chain Heal apparently isn't worth pressing, which again is, I mean, that's pretty standard Resto Shaman. My only claim to fame is that I made a video prior to whatever patch it was in Dragonflight where I was like, if I was a developer for a day, this is what I would do for Resto Shaman. And I mentioned two things. I said I would give a permanent damage reduction, couple of percent whatever to Earthshield to try and kind of offset their lack of proper external. And I would buff Chain Heal, but not numerically. I would buff the range on it. I would specifically bring in the PvP talent that buffed the range on Chain Heal, and I would put it on the talent tree. Because spread AoE healing is what Resto Shaman kind of sucked at. This was Dragonflight. I think I'd just probably done like an Onaran Plains, the big storm boss where everyone spreads out to collect the orbs and then everyone takes heaps of damage. And I probably did it on a Resto Shaman and I thought, man, this sucks. It needs something. I'm expecting to kind of go back to that opinion because I've heard that that PvP talent is now gone from the tree again. So Chain Heal, bad range, also bad healing. And without that, yeah, I'm worried about AoE healing. As for Holy Paladin, again, this is a healer where I haven't heard any real good things about it at all. I do know that Crusader Strike is gone. So the only point I have in my little, here's a good thing about Holy Paladin expectations is that I really disliked Crusader Strike as a filler for gameplay. So having that gone, I'm hoping that the gameplay will feel much better. As for concerns, after having just said that. Maybe losing Crusader Strike has left some holes in the kind of rotation or the gaps in its gameplay. I've also heard that the builder spender playstyle isn't great, specifically because spenders don't feel strong. If that's just a numerical problem, or if it isn't a problem at all, and Holy Paladin has good builder spender gameplay, that would be a huge win. I think Blizzard have been trying to kind of pin the tail on that donkey for a while and failed, so I'm hoping they'll get there. I've also heard Holy Paladin has a lot of passives or procs like trivial healing that just happens when you're pressing other buttons or doing other things. I'm unsure whether or not that's a downside. If Holy Paladin is numerically strong, that's the sort of thing that would make Holy Paladin like Giga OP, super disgusting. Everyone would cry to have it nerfed instantly because you could just like press whatever and do anything and just press buttons and everyone lives, which I think is what Resto Druid is kind of like now. But if Holy Paladin is balanced or maybe a little undertuned, having so much throughput caught up in like passive procs or things that you can't really control, or like little trivial trickle healing that looks good on meters or logs but doesn't feel impactful when you're actually playing the spec, then that can be a problem. Holy Priest. This Not only have I not heard anything good about Holy Priest, Holy Priest is the healer that everyone seems to be putting in F tier. It sucks. It hasn't had anything good the entire beta development. Blizzard forgot about it. It's in dog tier, in the dumpster out the back after being like shot 5 times. My expectation of Holy Priest, if it's anything like Resto Shaman, then none of that is really a red flag. And none of it is too surprising. I think Holy Priest for the entire life of Mythic Plus, Holy Priest has been good for like 1 season in Shadowlands, and that's only because it did damage. It wasn't a good healer. So my expectations, the bar for Holy Priest is set in keys, is set extremely low. And I'm pretty sure that's probably where it's going to be. I'm not expecting big things. The one talent that piqued my interest is Piety. The overheal, I think it's Oracle only, like 20% of overhealing that's permanently active gets split at up to like 4 targets or whatever that are injured. That just sounds cool. This is obviously very early, but this is the sort of talent that I could see becoming the problem for Holy Priest for the next, I don't know, couple of years. Kind of like that huge holy word, the big raid cooldown that Holy Priest used to have, where it healed everyone and put prayer mending on everyone. I'm sorry, it's been months since I've played, so some names are slipping my mind. But that one, for like years in raid, Holy Priest like rotational throughput was garbage. You could just press or spam spells all day and it just did no healing, and that was because it was balanced around having a gigantic, strongest cooldown in the game in raids. And I could see this overhealing Piety thing taking that sort of place, where maybe it becomes a problem in certain situations and therefore the rest of the Holy Toolkit kind of just languishes a little bit, especially if it's a smart heal. Like Holy Priest is a healer. If there's ever a time where it does good throughput, especially in a raid, and then it has a talent where it's just 20% of overhealing gets split into injured targets, Holy is going to be cooked. On the more personal side, this isn't really an expectation that I've seen from other content creators. First of all, there isn't really anyone who plays Holy in any serious content. So people tend to not talk about it too much. But losing Premonition, that one hurts. I actually think Premonition for both Discipline and Holy Priest was one of the best introductions in the War Within. One of the best hero talents for any healer. I really enjoyed that. I thought it added a good amount of complexity and depth to Holy, which it otherwise lacked. I think the same is true for Discipline. Sure, it got out of hand a little bit with the disc talents giving them too many shields and too many buffs and Oracle becoming disgusting for disc specifically. But I think losing all of that for Holy might really hurt its gameplay. It might feel a bit like it used to for the past 20 years where it just feels like a flash heal bot, and then sometimes you press some other spells, but it's all just flash heal. Holy Priest, especially in keys for what, like since Legion, basically for the entirety that Mythic Plus has been around, has been like that Scooby-Doo meme where it's like Holy Priest and you pull the hood off and it's just flash heal. Well, that's what I'm expecting again. On to the other pre-spec, Discipline. One of my three, I guess you would say, mains, one of the healing specs I enjoy the most. The good expectations. I'm expecting Evangelism with the triple Power Word Radiance buff thing to be very fun and very cool, and hopefully help disc out a lot in where it conventionally lacks, which is like burst healing. Especially if it's reactionary and you're not like fully ramped pumping atonement healing into your big window. The other exciting expectation for Discipline is the double charge of Penance, which I believe is Oracle only. So my expectations of Voidweaver disc is pretty much in the toilet. I'm expecting it to be no different than it is in War Within. I'm expecting its AoE throughput to be kind of like, yeah, it's okay, probably not as good as other healers, and I'm expecting it to have massive downsides, which is its single target healing, like debuff healing, spot healing, is probably going to be awful. I'm hoping that Oracle feels much more well-rounded. Double charge of Penance will be amazing. Penance is one of my favorite abilities in the entire game. It looks cool. It feels cool. As long as it's impactful to press, I'm expecting Oracle Disc to be like top tier gameplay. I have seen quite a bit of mention of atonement healing feeling quite lacking, and that the kind of gameplay or play style of Discipline has shifted more into the direct reactionary healing rather than atonement healing. That would be bad. I don't think it would be that bad because I don't see how disc operates any other way other than having half decent atonement healing. Even if it's not, like maybe it's one of those issues where people are used to playing the War Within, where they're used to being able to just apply atonements to a group with one powered radiance and then just spam damage and get through like all the healing checks basically in the game until you get to very high keys. If that isn't the case anymore, that's fine. If I can't smite spam my way through a mechanic, I'm all good with that. But there is a fine line, because if it actually turns out that it's like, dude, atonement healing does nothing, all you're doing all the time is like spamming flash heal or whatever disc has now, like it used to be back when it had Shadow Mend, well then disc will be bad. I don't think that'll be the case, but we'll have to see. All right, we have 3 healing specs left. And I have specifically left Resto Druid till last because I've been told by some Giga gamers to not touch it until the very end. It'll be the last spec I play because it's probably going to ruin all the other healers because it's busted, supposedly. On to Preservation. Taking a look at my notes for the good expectations of Preservation, a lot of this I think boils down to some of the kind of pain points of the spec, some of the degenerate gameplay, some of the annoying micromanagement being taken away as being the main benefits. Verdant Embrace being a choice node where you don't have to move to the target that you're Verdant Embracing, huge win. Hopefully the Engulf mega stacking super burst top the whole raid or top the whole group in one button and then do no healing between your engulfs. Hopefully that degenerate playstyle is gone. And then some small quality of life changes like Verdant Embrace. I think it's Life of the Something Mother talent where you have to VE before you Dream Breath to get the buffed Dream Breath. If that goes away, again, that'll be a huge win. But as far as expectations go overall for Preservation, it's actually quite a difficult one to get a handle on by watching other people because there aren't that many people that play Preservation. The major elephant in the room, kind of like Preservation, that maybe it has a big change, like Spirit Bloom being removed. And then because people don't have a lot of experience playing it, then, months go past and that's really all people talk about. Like, Spirit Bloom, they just repeat the talking points. Spirit Bloom got removed. That's what it feels like for Prez. I am expecting there to be some kind of relearning or some pain points to figure out how to get through certain mechanics without relying on Spirit Bloom for your big chunky heal. I think that the changes that have been made to the spec overall for both hero talents hopefully will be enough to offset the removal of Spirit Bloom, and then also hopefully the whole spec will feel a little bit more fluid and better to play. This isn't an expectation. This is more of like, because I haven't seen people talk about this, but my hope for preservation is that it does healing outside of your empowered spells. Because I am quite used to preservation where it can be really fun to play, but also, you know, you're comboing 3 or 4 different buttons together and your healing comes out in these massive bursts every 15 or 20 seconds, and then you do no healing in between. If that goes away and preservation gets a lot better, like rotational healing still has good cooldowns, but isn't wholly reliant on them, I'll be really happy. Funnily enough, I also haven't seen a whole lot of talk about Mistweaver, at least for specifics. I've seen a lot of videos where people say like Mistweaver feels good and Mistweaver is really fun. But as to why exactly that is, I've come up short. I've heard that it got a pretty good version of the kind of pruning / streamlining pass that Blizzard took to all the healers. I've seen people praise a lot of small changes for Mistweaver talents in particular. So hopefully it will be more fluid to play. I know removing the buff maintenance on Feline Stomp, or whatever that's called now, ruffled some feathers when it was first announced. That's a straight W, in my opinion. That's a fantastic change. Anything that moves Mistweaver away from like the 10 different little micromanagement buttons that they have to press every 15 seconds, or they have to enveloping mist before they press this because or else it does no healing or whatever, or if all that combo stuff goes away and Mistweaver just does healing with abilities, but there's still some synergies between those abilities, that would be fantastic. So that's what I'm hoping for. Also, moving when channeling Soothing Mist is like a top 3 change for all of Midnight for all healers, in my opinion. I was really excited to get that in Battle for Azeroth. I was lucky enough to be in one of the very early beta waves for that, and I got to play before it got removed from the beta, and I really enjoyed it. And now that it looks like it's sticking around, I am very excited. So I am expecting Mistweaver to be very fun to play, especially caster Mistweaver, something that I tried to make work multiple times over the years, and people, my friends, laugh at me for it, like, oh, you're going to come to a key, you're going to bring your dumb little caster Mistweaver that does no damage, and in hopefully Midnight, I'll be able to say, yeah, I am. It also seems like both Fistweaver and the ranged Mistweaver are viable builds, and they kind of work, like they have the talent options to make both work. So that sounds great. I think Mistweaver developers have been knocking it out of the park for a while now. I think Mistweaver has gone from being kind of one of those kind of clunky, half works, but has some serious problems, no one knows exactly how to fix it, specs. Let's say before Dragonflight, maybe early Dragonflight, to one of the most well fleshed out, most enjoyable, really fun healing specs to play. And I'm expecting more of that going forward. I'm expecting a very high standard for Mistweaver. And if Blizzard keep doing the same work in Midnight or for the beta that they have been doing the last couple of years, I think Mistweaver is going to be great. Out of all of the healers, Mistweaver is the only one that I haven't got anything listed down as a negative. I don't know if that's me huffing the copium a little bit too much, or if it just, a lot of people are just saying it's like pretty good, higher echelons, it's really fun, nothing major bad to say about it. Now, as for Resto Druid, the kind of elephant in the room, yeah, I'm expecting it to be busted numerically. I'm expecting to press nothing and just do infinite HBS. I'm expecting to not learn to play Resto Druid. This is one of those interesting things. I've played all healers now for, I don't know, years. And Resto Druid is that one healer that I've never really had to learn because I've only ever played it when it was super numerically strong. And then you don't have to play well. You just press buttons. Doesn't matter what order, doesn't matter what, if something's on cooldown, you just press something else. And everyone lives. And I'm expecting that Resto Druid is the exact same now. Where it's like, hey, did you proc your little treant dude before your other thing? Did you press this button and then that one? Did you stack your hots and then press your big hit? Did you do none of those things? It doesn't matter. Everyone's 100% health. That's what I'm expecting. I'm also expecting, which I think is also where a lot of the Resto Druid kind of power is coming from, is the streamlining of Resto Druid, making it much easier to play. Less busy work, less micromanagement, more just you press a button and it feels impactful and health bars move and it's crazy. One of the few downsides I've heard for Resto Druid is that it is losing some emphasis on healing over time effects, like HOTS. They play some part of the toolkit. If you really want to min-max, you're definitely still using them and tracking them, but in a lot of situations, you just press regrowth 95 times and heal through everything. Resto Druid has been like that in the past. I specifically remember in Battle for Azeroth at some point in the prison dungeon where you work your way up to the top with the cannons and everything. I'm sorry, I've forgotten the name. It's been a while. I remember pushing keys in that dungeon, swapping to my Resto Druid with 0 gear, spamming the crap out of regrowth the entire dungeon, and then breezing my way through it. I have complained in the past about that sort of playstyle. I think Resto Druid is always better when it is fundamentally based around healing over time effects. But if Resto Druid really does just devolve into like really numerically powerful but degenerate gameplay where you just press regrowth over and over and over again, then Blizzard will have definitely missed the mark on that one, I think. It could also be one of those situations where it flies under the radar a little bit, where people are so focused on it being numerically strong that the poor gameplay gets ignored. I'm also slightly nervous that this is one of those kind of classic Resto Druid cases where it feels good to play when it's numerically OP. But as soon as the numbers get toned down, it feels like you're spinning 6 plates and spending 2 mana bars and min-maxing every global and stacking all your mastery and making all the right moves to just do the same amount of healing as what other healers do with 2 buttons. That might be a bit of a doomer take from me. Maybe it won't be that bad. But overall, I am expecting it to be very powerful and I am expecting it to get nerfed. All right, I'm going to go spend a week or so playing all the healers in beta, spam a whole bunch of keys to see how my opinions differ after playing Midnight compared to my opinions going in. All right, it's been about a week and a half, 40, 45 keys or so later on beta. And I am back to happily report that healing feels good. I expected it to be better. It is better. 6 out of the 7 healing specs are either slight or significant improvements in Midnight over how they were in the War Within. And I think, unfortunately, one spec missed the mark for me, quite disappointed in it. I'll let you guys take a guess at that one. We'll get there eventually. It'll be quite obvious when I start complaining about it. But overall, yeah, healing, quite fun, much better. I think the main difference is healing is going to feel a lot more approachable. If I can sum up all the kind of content creator takeaways from most of the healing changes or changes to healers in Midnight, it's that I've seen some people that really like it and then other people that complain that let's say the kind of minor changes, the streamlining of healers have made healing like too simple. I think the challenge, skill expression, and fun of playing a healer doesn't have anything to do with making the decision about pressing Healing Wave or Healing Surge, or making sure that you press Phaline Stomp or Jadefire Stomp or whatever it is now every 20 seconds to keep your Ancient Teachings buff up, or to drop your Efflorescence again every time the group moves. I don't think that healers or healing has gotten any simpler because those sorts of pseudo complexity have been taken away. So I see all of those changes as just like straight wins. I think the game is just better in Midnight. All right, I'm going to start off with Resto Shaman and work through the same order that I did the expectations for. And for Resto Shaman, I want to say I was whelmed. I wasn't underwhelmed. I wasn't overwhelmed. It wasn't exciting, but it also wasn't really disappointing. It was Resto Shaman. The one minor complaint I have with Resto Shaman is that its healing throughput feels very random. Whether or not I procced extra totems or not, whether I proc Ascendance or not, determined how good my healing felt to more of a degree than any other healer. There were times where I had like 3 of the Apex healing stream totem buffed totems running, and in that I'm waiting for health bars to move in that case. There's nothing for me to do. I've just procced triple totems. There's some boss mechanic going out, like Veximus or something. The orbs are going out and everyone stays full health. And I have nothing to do. But then there are other times where I didn't proc all of those things, or I didn't proc Ascendance or whatever. And then it felt like there were no buttons for me to press to get my healing. I know Blizzard tried to, I think, work that problem out a little bit in one of the recent changes where they added like you can force proc the totem by pressing Nature Swiftness. That has helped, but I don't think it's enough. But I think with some more work on, let's say, normalizing their throughput rather than the very high peaks and then the low troughs, if they can average out their throughput a little bit, and then Blizzard can also perhaps buff the overall numbers up slightly, I think Resto Shaman could be quite good. All right, on to Holy Paladin. This one was a little bit of a roller coaster for me because I hated it at first. Like, hate probably isn't a strong enough word. I vehemently disliked Holy Paladin. I was ready to give that thing a 1 out of 10 and move on, log off, play something else. It was awful. I didn't know where my healing was meant to come from. I didn't know what buttons I was supposed to be prioritizing. I didn't know what gameplay I was supposed to be playing around. Like, am I a melee healer? Am I casting? Am I using judgment as much as possible? Am I builder spender? Am I using the procs that I get? Am I not using them? What are my cooldowns? It felt like a gigantic mess. But eventually I stumbled onto a build that worked out quite well for me and was actually like, it was so fun that I would actually say Holy Paladin was one of my top 3 healers for all of beta. Came in at number 3. So that was definitely quite the turnaround. I talented every way I possibly could into Judgment. I went with melee wings as my kind of main AoE throughput cooldown. I unfortunately had to rely on hard casting Holy Lights for some of the big emergency spot healing or the tanks getting clapped kind of healing. But for the most part, I was just full sending damage. I was playing Holy Paladin like a Disc Priest or a Mistweaver Monk that I've enjoyed over the years with the do damage to heal my party kind of playstyle. And I really liked it. It was very fun. Seeing a judgment fly out and then seeing your whole party's health bars just top up, very enjoyable. The downsides are that it didn't feel like there was much flexibility in the playstyle or the builds at all. It was a build I'm lucky that I stumbled into and decided to try and kind of see how these sorts of talents would work together. But I also found if for whatever reason I wasn't pressing those buttons or I wasn't talenting into those specific talents, then the entire spec felt like it was broken. Like I literally checked to see I had the right gear on or it wasn't broken. And I'm imagining that there are going to be people next week when pre-patch hits, they will play Holy Paladin maybe, and maybe they won't have the exact talents you need to make the spec work. Crusaders might, by the way. And they're going to be like, wondering if they have a fishing pole equipped when they go and do a key, because it felt so bad. It's very hit or miss, the entire spec. The gameplay also very rigid. I was pretty much doing this, pressing the same buttons, going through the same rotation, the same kind of answer to every mechanic, regardless of what health bars look like or what the group was doing. The only time I stopped what I was doing to emergency heal was with Holy Light. And there were times where it felt a little bit like, Jesus, take the wheel. someone's dropping low, someone's got a debuff on them, I'm pressing judge, and then I'm going to, I don't know, word of glory them. Their health bar probably isn't going to move, but then I'm going to press wings in like 3 seconds, and then I'll heal them up to full with the instant holy light proc that you can get. And if they don't live for the 3 seconds, I guess it is what it is. So while it had the potential to be very fun, and dare I say powerful, I think they're close. I think it's like, if they get the tuning right on a couple of these things and they lean the right way on a couple of decisions, I could see Holy Paladin working out very, very well. But it's on a knife's edge, because if let's say they nerf Crusader's Might talent, or they don't want people hardcasting Holy Light for their big spot healing, or maybe there aren't 57 talents that all work with or buff Judgment, then the spec's going to be in a lot of trouble. One of the other things I really didn't like about Holy Paladin, and I'm assuming this is just like the devs haven't quite got around to doing their final pass, because, for example, if you play Lightsmith, your Holy Armaments replaces your Divine Toll, and your Divine Toll is on the class tree, but it's on a choice node with Holy Prism. And if you're an idiot like me and you go into a key and you have Prism talented, your Holy Armaments doesn't have Divine Toll to replace, so your Holy Armaments don't work. The button goes away. Because apparently the choice node, like your whole hero talent tree doesn't work because you've taken the wrong choice node on your class tree. So I'm assuming that there's some kind of pass, like a cleanup pass that's going to happen, where Blizzard will hopefully go through and fix those kind of problems. But having my hero talent replace one of the cooldowns that I'm given on the class tree to try and like solve a problem, let's say I need to build up all my holy power as fast as possible, Divine Toll is a great way to do that. Having those sorts of cooldowns or options replaced outright feels pretty awful. I would really like to play Lightsmith with Prism, or I would like to play with Divine Toll. Having that replace those abilities, not fun. All right, time for the other Holy spec, Priest. Now, I wasn't expecting anything from Holy Priest. I was expecting it to be somewhat similar to the War Within, a lot of flash heal spam, pretty one-dimensional, not great in keys. I think for a long time, Holy Priest has been the kind of raid healer that has never quite translated over into keys well. I mean, dare I say, I think that has finally happened in Midnight. I think Holy Priest finally feels like a modern healing spec and not the leftovers of a raid spec. I can't believe I'm about to glaze Holy Priest, but here we go. What makes Holy feel like a modern healing spec now? There's quite a few things that have added up. The major change now for Midnight is the talent that allows you to forego Sanctify, and instead your Serenity cleaves its healing or splits its healing, whatever, onto other targets. And then all of the talents that affect Sanctify also will now affect Serenity. That is a fantastic talent. Probably one of the best talents for any healer as far as gameplay goes for all of Midnight. But you also have Prompt Prognosis now, which is I think it's about half a Serenity's worth of healing that gets tacked onto the main target of your Prayer of Mending. The 2 charges of Prayer of Mending if you are Oracle, and Prayer of Healing feeling actually pretty balanced. If you take the talent that gives your main target of Prayer of Healing the extra heal, it ends up being pretty similar, like raw healing, to a flash heal. It takes a little bit longer to cast, but I think that's a good balance, because there are a lot of times where I do want to heal the whole party, but I do also want to prioritize healing on one target in particular. And I found myself using Prayer of Healing a lot more than I have in the past. Health bars going up and down slower with more damaging events to kill people or to put people in danger has made Prayer of Mending feel a lot better. And also more time to heal people up, and let's say not being stressed if someone's sitting at like 80% health or something, has also allowed for Holy Priest's Mastery to do some more work. So all those things in combination, I think, have done a lot for Holy Priest. Feels like the spec is finally playing in the year of our Lord 2025. The few downsides I have for Holy is that obviously it's a pre-spec, its mobility still sucks, which is a bit unfortunate. Its overall healing throughput felt a little weak, but while recording this video or since doing my testing, it did get a global 10% buff on beta, so that might have gone a long way to helping that. And the Apex talent felt awful. I like Benediction. I don't know, man. It's not an interesting talent. I did also forget to say the Apex talent for Holy Pally also absolute dog water. Like for the Holy Pally one, it's a passive effect that is so weak it's not even worth playing around, and it's an Apex talent. If it was powerful enough at least to make me like look out for it on raid frames, I can't imagine that would be enjoyable to do in raid, but in party it's probably okay. But let's say I saw the savior beacon thing go on a target and then that target was going to get significantly more healing, so maybe I would prioritize healing, or let's say adjust my gameplay to utilize that, then that talent could be quite fun. But as it stands, it's passive. It's so weak, it's not worth making adjustments to your gameplay. Like if someone has the buff and they're on 50% health and someone else is on 40% health, I'm going to heal the guy on lower health. So yeah, the Holy Paladin Apex talent, awful. And then same with the Holy Priest one. I think the Holy Priest one could be good if it was just stronger. Like if I got the Benediction, I think it's called. If I saw the buff and then was like, oh cool, I'm now going to press a button and do heaps of healing, that could be fun. But as it stands, man, if my flash heal icon on my little cooldown tracker didn't change when I procced Benediction, I wouldn't even know that the Apex talent was working. It's so weak. And also the big emphasis on all the cosmic ripples. Not a huge fan of cosmic ripple at all, but also, yeah, it felt unimpactful to say the least. The other pre-spec discipline was probably the most fun I had healing all the keys on beta, or let's say equally best with Mistweaver. I was expecting the triple evangelism button to be kind of cool. It wasn't. I would much prefer for evangelism to just go back to being the button you press to give your group a big top-up heal, but that is a pretty minor complaint. What I was expecting to be excellent was the double penance charge when playing Oracle, and it was. Really, really fun. It might not sound great on paper, like, oh, whoop-de-doo, you get 2 charges on an ability. Penance is like the discipline button, in my opinion. So anything that lets me press penance more often is fun. I like all the interactions. I like spreading my dots with penance. I like being able to defensive heal people with penance. I like everything about it. So having many more of them to press, and also the ability if I really need to. Like if I know a big debuff's coming out soon, there were times when I would just hold off pressing offensive penance, and then when the debuff comes out, I knew I would have double back-to-back defensive penances to press. Really fun, really good, really powerful. Everything about it was great. I have nothing but praise for Oracle Discipline Priest, yet again. I also think the shields on Oracle Disc might be a problem again. There were times where if I got a couple of procs of the Apex talent, like in quick succession, I could quite easily cover my group with some pretty chunky shields. Also, those shields, so you proc that Apex talent with penance and it causes your next power word shield to basically go onto 2 other targets, and it like juices them up into bigger shields and it makes them void or whatever. So then when people take damage on those shields, the damage that those shields reflect also counts towards atonement. But the cool part about that is that when you press your powered shield, you apply atonement to all 3 targets. So that's a decision, Blizzard. It's a little bit strong. Same with the shields, same with the reflected atonement damage. It's a really fun, really powerful Apex talent. The only downside, the only thing I was a bit wary of was I'd heard that Discipline lost its emphasis, at least in a little bit, on atonement healing. And that Discipline now was you were pressing a lot more like direct or triage healing, and atonement wouldn't get you through all your mechanics. I found the opposite to be true, but that depends largely on what people mean by atonement healing. My version of Atonement Healing is doing damage to heal, but I'm still pressing Power Word Shield on cooldown. I'm still pressing Penance on cooldown. And with that, especially as Oracle, I felt like my Atonement Healing was even more, like the most powerful, I think, ever in dungeons. However, if your version of Atonement Healing is, let's say you're playing Voidweaver and you've applied all your atonements, some big boss mechanic comes out, and then you press Mind Blast, and then you're spamming Smite like 15 times, that version of Atonement Healing probably is a bit weaker than it has been. I was hoping that the Oracle talent called Piety was going to be strong. I think I was specifically hoping this on Holy Priest. It's a talent that transfers, I think it's like 20% of your overhealing that gets split onto injured targets within range or something like that. But it's permanently active. You don't have to do anything for it. And I was hoping that would help Holy Priest out a lot. I didn't notice it a lot on Holy Priest, but damn, on Disciplined Priest, that was like pretty routinely third or fourth highest healing done. Very cool talent, very powerful, probably going to get nerfed, but I would prefer if it didn't. I only had a couple of minor criticisms for Disc though, overall, and they are all talent related. I think a couple of the talents just missed. Like I just don't think they were very good ideas to begin with, regardless of how well they were implemented. I think this whole idea, especially for a healer, of like proccing random effects, especially powerful ones, not the greatest. So for example, the talent that gives you a chance, I think it's a 40% chance to proc Shadow Fiend when you press Shadow Word Death, but only on targets below 20% health. Not a fan of that talent or that style of talent at all. Same with the Evangelism that ties Mindbender to it. Also not a fan of that at all. Shadow Mend coming back, also yuck. All right, on to the awful healer that probably everyone already guessed, Preservation. I think what I was hoping for Preservation was that the spec would become more approachable to play. I don't want to say easy. I don't mind healing specs being hard, especially when you're trying to min-max everything and you're trying to play as close to perfectly as possible. I think a high skill ceiling is fine. My problem with Preservation is you can press all the buttons and do nothing. You can also press all the buttons in a slightly different way and do huge amounts of healing. And I was hoping that the difference between those two things, those two outcomes, would be a little bit better in Midnight. Because on paper, the Verdant Embrace change, the Dream Breath change, or Spirit Bloom being basically rolled into Dream Breath as the second charge, and the Lifebind changes should make the spec somewhat easier to play, or at least more intuitive. Because the result of those changes is fewer buttons, less unintuitive healing styles or healing combinations, and less reliance on what can often be unpredictable movement to get healing out. That should all make the spec easier to play, less punishing. And it all sounds good. It should have helped Prez a lot. It just didn't. And now it feels like they're trying to cover more damage patterns, more healing events, more boss mechanics with even fewer buttons. And it just seems harder. I played a few keys on Preservation and I started daydreaming and imagining myself giving the kind of interview from Office Space to the Preservation developer, where I'm sitting there like, and what is it that you thought you were going to get out of these changes? Like, what was the goal of all of these patch notes? What were you trying to achieve? Because whatever that is, I'm not really seeing it. The spec doesn't feel any more fun to play. It doesn't feel any easier. It doesn't feel any more approachable. It doesn't feel any less punishing or anything else positive that I can think of. The 40 yards now on Dream Breath, it makes Preservation feel more like a normal healer with a 30-yard Dispel and 30-yard Living Flame and stuff for some reason, rather than a short-range healer that has some lenience on a very important spell by giving it the extra range. Overall, the throughput actually felt okay, but it also felt like there were major tools in the proverbial healing toolkit that Preservation just didn't have. All right, on to Mistweaver. This was the other healing spec that was the equally most enjoyable spec for me throughout beta. And I think it's safe to say that the Mistweaver developer has cooked yet again. This guy's on fire now for like 3 or 4 years running. I was expecting Mistweaver to be quite fun gameplay wise, and it was, especially going into the move while channeling Soothing Mist and Crackling Jade Lightning, which is what I did. What I wasn't expecting was how like OP it was going to be. Not just numbers. The numbers are definitely there. I would actually say Mistweaver is not that far behind Resto Druid when it comes to raw throughput, but also the gameplay itself. So I effectively made a build where I talented into every possible way I could for Ancient Teachings. But then instead of being in melee range and like kick punching my way through a key, I instead did my damage with Crackling Jade Lightning. Now for trash, especially because Crackling Jade now will cleave onto 4 targets like all the time for effectively double damage compared to the 1 target. And I found for trash, that was just like incredibly OP. And all the smart healing happening and everything like that is, yeah, it's good damage. It's really high HPS. It doesn't rely on cooldowns or procs or anything. It's just, you can just press the button whenever you want all the time and do huge amounts of healing. Also, for some reason, it costs no mana. Blizzard are probably going to fix that one pretty quick. It did also get buffed since I played it. It used to like reduce your movement speed by 40%. Now it's only 20. So I'm going to be zooming even faster now. Funnily enough, I don't have any complaints for Mistweaver, I don't think. All of the current like Mistweaver healing styles are still there. If you want to do a lot of hard casting or like casted healing, you can. If you want to fist weave in melee range, you can. If you want to stand back and do some fist weaving with Crackling Jade Lightning, you can. If you want to lean heavily into like enveloping mist and hot playstyles, you can. Also, the change to the class talent tree that allows you to get your instant cast Vivify, not just from pressing Rising Sun Kick, but now you can also do it from Enveloping Mist. Amazing change. And now on to Resto Druid. And yeah, mega OP numerically. Resto Druid on beta could probably take a 20% haircut to their overall throughput and they would still be the king. I was expecting the streamlining for Resto Druid to make the spec a lot easier to play, a lot less like busy work, micromanaging, and that is true. But I also think perhaps Resto Druid streamlining went a little bit too far. This could also be a result of their overall like throughput healing just being a little bit too high. But it feels a bit like the spec now is just a Life Bloom and Regrowth bot. I'm trying to find the right way to say this because I don't want people to hear that and think, oh, he thinks it's bad that Resto Druid's really strong and it's like really fun to play now. It is good. It is fun. It is really strong. The gameplay is significantly better, in my opinion, than it has been in the past. But I think we are watching Resto Druid kind of lose its way a little bit here, which perhaps is an unpopular thing to say while it is like universally considered to be so powerful on beta. But Life Bloom, for example, used to be a high maintenance single target healing over time effect, and it had a shorter duration than other Resto Druid healing over time effects. I think it also had a higher mana cost, and you had to stack it multiple times. The idea was that it was powerful, but you paid for that power by spending quite a few globals on it, right? And you could only have it on one target and all this kind of stuff. And we are back to that now with one target, but not really. Because Life Bloom with all the talents will now stack itself. It will split like cleave healing onto the rest of the party. It will provide mastery buff stacks. It'll drop efflorescence. It'll proc verdancy. And you can force the proc with, I think it's Consuming Soul of the Forest after a Swift Mend. So you can force it to bloom 5 times quickly. And it also has some nice synergies with Regrowth. It'll provide your clear casting buffs, which then buffs your regrowth, and your regrowths will then also cleave their hot tailing effect onto your Life Bloom target, and your regrowth cast time can also be reduced with other talents, and then you can also proc a way to cleave your regrowth onto, I think, 3 targets, and then also your regrowth now for some reason just AoE heals all the other targets with regrowth on them as well. And the end result is that like if you, let's say next week, when pre-patch hits. You log on to a Resto Druid, you open up the talent tree, you type in Life Bloom, and you look at like a dozen talents that light up. And the same thing happens for regrowth. And then you make a build where you just take all those talents and then you press those 2 buttons. Congratulations, you've got a crazy powerful healer that has a million synergies rolling and interactions that everything kind of just works in and of those 2 buttons. But then also those 2 buttons become your hammers and everything becomes a nail. So the spec can get a little bit one-dimensional, I think. You get so much power as a Resto Druid by just keeping up 1 hot that's not hard to keep up. And then as needed, you spam 1 button and that's it. You have more synergies, more power, more talent effects and stuff going off than other healers have by pressing all their buttons. So I think it's a little bit over the top. The bigger problem with Resto Druid, I think, is that with the healer damage changes, making healer damage a lot more irrelevant, meaningless in dungeons, Resto Druid falls into this weird spot where I think the skill cap or the fun or the skill expression, whatever you want to say, of Resto Druid used to be the ability to min-max the spec by spending as little time healing as possible and as much time doing damage as possible. And then knowing when to swap back and forth between those 2 modes was what I think a lot of people enjoyed about Resto Druid. And it was made difficult or fun for a lot of people because they also weren't exactly easy things to swap back and forth between. You had to know what damage was coming next, what hots you had to get rolling beforehand, because most of Resto Druid's healing has required some setup or some ramp. It wasn't something that you could keep going all the time while also doing damage. And now it feels like it is. A lot of the ramp aspect of Resto Druid feels like it's gone. You kind of, like I said, you kind of just keep up 1 hot and then as needed you press regrowth and you're pretty much good to go. There might be a little bit more min-maxing involved. Perhaps if Resto Druid does get nerfed a little bit, we will see the need for that sort of higher ceiling or like more buttons being needed. Maybe that'll come into play. But as it stands on the beta at the moment, at least, that's not the case. Other than those as my minor complaints, that's about it for Resto Druid, and that wraps up all of the healers. So if you've stayed for this extremely long video, thank you for making it to the end, and algorithm stuff. Thanks for watching.